Imagine if the world could be 1,000 years ahead of where it is today. What kind of a world would we be living in? Would we be colonizing other planets, eradicating disease, or harnessing limitless energy if 1,000 years of scientific progress hadn't been stifled? These are the haunting questions that arise when we consider the grip of the Roman Catholic Church during the Dark Ages. From the suppression of ideas to the persecution of free thinkers, the Church's iron-fisted rule over what was allowed to be said or even thought relegated Europe to 1,000 years of stagnation. The Roman Catholic Church, professing to be the beacon of spiritual guidance, became an institution synonymous with control and repression during the Middle Ages, a period so terrible that they are referred to as the Dark Ages. Following the collapse of the Roman Empire in the 5th century, Europe descended into chaos, leaving a vacuum of power that the Church quickly filled. Instead of fostering knowledge and inquiry, it established itself as the ultimate authority, wielding both spiritual and temporal power over kings and commoners alike. In this environment, questioning the Church's teachings was heresy that carried with it public shaming, torture, and death for those who the Church deemed unrepentant or possessed. The Church's most infamous tool of suppression was the Inquisition, which began in the 12th century and extended its reach well into the early 1800s. For over 600 years, the Inquisition's mission was to root out heresy, but in practice, it became a method to subdue dissent, control the population, and silence intellectual ideas and thinking. Scientists, philosophers, and even ordinary citizens who dared to question the Church's dogma faced torture, imprisonment, or execution. The mere accusation of heresy was often enough to seal one's fate, and the fear it instilled kept many from voicing even the most basic of ideas or contemplating lines of thought that differed from the Church. Over 600 years, the number of people who were subjected to the Inquisition numbered up to 30 million, with many of those being tortured, imprisoned, and even burned at the stake. This climate of fear stymied intellectual development for centuries. Experimentation, critical thinking, and scientific inquiry were seen as threats to the Church's authority and were forbidden. The works of ancient Greek and Roman thinkers like Aristotle, Ptolemy, and Hippocrates, which could have served as building blocks for progress, were either suppressed or selectively interpreted to align with religious teachings. The Church cherry-picked ideas that supported its worldview and discarded or condemned the rest, effectively censoring human thought. One of the most egregious acts of intellectual suppression was the banning and burning of books and the complete destruction of knowledge. Book burnings were common during the Dark Ages. In 1242, the Church ordered the burning of thousands of Jewish manuscripts in Paris, claiming they contained heretical ideas. Similarly, in the 15th century, the Spanish Inquisition confiscated and destroyed countless texts that it deemed contrary to Christian beliefs. Libraries, the custodians of human knowledge, became battlegrounds where ideas perished in flames. The loss of these works robbed humanity of centuries of accumulated wisdom, setting back advancements in medicine, astronomy, and engineering. It cannot even be fathomed how much knowledge was lost during these 1,000 years of Church control of thought and ideas. The Church destroyed books, scrolls, and writings dating back as far as ancient Greek antiquity. The sheer amount of human knowledge and history that is lost to us today is unimaginable. The Church's opposition to scientific discovery reached its zenith when the Inquisition put Galileo Galilei on trial, as well as other high-profile mathematicians and astronomers. Galileo, armed with his telescope and a growing body of evidence, dared to challenge the geocentric model of the universe, which the Church had adopted as doctrine. His support for the heliocentric theory, that the Earth orbits the Sun, was met with fierce resistance. In 1633, Galileo was tried by the Roman Inquisition and forced to recant his findings. He spent the rest of his life under house arrest, and all of his works were banned. The Church's refusal to accept observable reality delayed the acceptance of heliocentrism and other science for decades, even centuries. Beyond scientific suppression, the Church's control extended to education and intellectual discourse. Monasteries became the primary centers of learning, but their teachings were strictly confined to religious doctrine. Any pursuit of knowledge that strayed from theological concerns was discouraged or outright forbidden. Universities that emerged in medieval Europe operated under the Church's oversight, ensuring that intellectual exploration remained tethered to religious orthodoxy. Imagine what could have been achieved if these institutions had been free to explore the natural world without fear of retribution. The Church's influence preserved some ancient knowledge through the efforts of monks who copied texts by hand. However, this preservation was selective and often came with reinterpretation to fit Christian teachings. Today, the Church tries to claim credit for safeguarding civilization, but the reality of history shows that the Church stifled and subdued all forms of science and free thinking for almost 1,000 years. The Renaissance, often seen as the period that finally broke the Church's intellectual chokehold, was fueled by a rediscovery of ancient texts and ideas that had been buried or ignored for centuries. The invention of the printing press in the year 1440 allowed for ideas to spread quickly, breaking the grip the Church had on the spread of new ideas. It ushered in an explosion of art, science, and philosophy, which also directly challenged the Church's authority. Figures like Copernicus, Kepler, and Newton built upon suppressed knowledge, igniting a scientific revolution that transformed humanity's understanding of the universe. So, did the Roman Catholic Church steal 1,000 years of progress? While it's impossible to quantify exactly how much was lost, the evidence suggests that the Church's dominance delayed advancements that could have been made centuries earlier. The suppression of ideas, destruction of knowledge, and persecution of free thinkers for hundreds of years created an environment where progress was stifled. The world might have looked very different today if those centuries had been spent building upon the foundations of ancient knowledge rather than dismantling or ignoring them. As we reflect back on this dark chapter of history, it's important to remember those who dared to stand up for reason and free thinking, only to be tortured or burned at the stake by the Inquisition, killed for the crime of thinking something other than what the Roman Catholic Church decreed as acceptable. Despite the Church's attempts to control thought, humanity eventually broke free, ushering in an age of discovery and innovation. But the scars of that suppression remain, and it's important to remember the dangers of placing power above progress and dogma above inquiry. The story of the Roman Catholic Church's influence during the Dark Ages is not just about the loss of centuries of learning, but also a reminder of what happens when knowledge is chained and free thought is condemned. The vast amount of knowledge that was lost because of hundreds of years of book burnings can never be recovered. They are gone forever, and one can only imagine the amazing books and writings humanity would have had if the Church had never had control for 10 centuries. If you enjoyed our exploration of the Roman Catholic Church, we know you'll enjoy our other Rise of Humans episodes on your screen and on our channel page. And I invite you back for our next episode of The Rise of Humans.